Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, I bring you the next video in the story of Hoai Ca and Hùng. Morning in the countryside begins very slowly, so slowly that one can clearly feel every small movement of the surrounding space. The scent of damp earth lingering after the night dew blends with the gentle chill of early morning, spreading across the fields. A thin layer of mist has yet to fully lift, drifting lazily over rows of lush green carrot tops, wrapping the entire field in a soft, tranquil stillness. The first light of day is still faint, just strong enough to pierce through the mist and reflect off dew-covered young leaves, shimmering like tiny specks of light. Hoai Ca and Hùng stand in the middle of the carrot field, each at a different spot, but close enough to talk without raising their voices. They bend down, slowly pulling carrots from the soil, hands already accustomed to the earth, decisive in movement, yet never rushed. Each time a carrot is lifted, its roots still clinging to dark brown soil, Hoai Ca gently brushes off the dirt, examines its shape, then sets it aside. The large, straight, evenly colored carrots are neatly grouped together, ready to be taken to the market. Smaller ones, crooked or branched, are separated for livestock feed. The sorting happens quietly but clearly, without much discussion, because both of them understand exactly what they are doing and why. In the stillness of the field, their conversation carries softly, blending with the sound of leaves brushing against one another and soil falling gently from carrot roots. As she works, Hoai Ca asks questions in a calm, attentive tone about how to sow seeds evenly, the proper spacing between plants, and how to prevent fungal disease so the carrots won't crack as they grow. These questions are not casual curiosity, but genuine concern, born from a desire to truly understand every step tied to this piece of land. Hùng doesn't answer hastily. Each explanation comes with a concrete example, and sometimes he even pauses his work to point directly at the rows in front of them. Hùng explains that planting sparsely gives the plants room to grow, allowing roots to go deeper and carrots to develop evenly. If planted too densely, the plants compete with each other, become more prone to disease, and produce smaller roots. He adds that the most critical stage of care is when the plants are still young, just after the leaves emerge from the soil. If the seedlings are weak, undernourished, or affected by fungus at that stage, it's hard to feel secure at harvest time, no matter how much effort is made later. His words aren't dry theory. They come from experience, from past seasons, from mistakes made and the labor lost before lessons were learned for the future. Hoai Ca listens intently, occasionally nodding, sometimes asking follow-up questions to understand each small detail more clearly. She realizes that this kind of knowledge can't be fully found in books. It can only be learned by standing in the field, hands in the soil, watching plants change day by day. Each of Hùng answers is tied to a specific memory, a particular harvest, making the conversation feel closer and easier to imagine. The atmosphere between them becomes gentle and natural, unforced, as if they have long been used to sharing such simple moments together. The bamboo basket beside them grows heavier as more carrots are placed inside. The soft, steady sound of carrots touching one another forms a quiet rhythm of the countryside morning. Inside that basket are not just the products of a season's work, but also diligence, patience, and the quiet joy of peaceful labor. Each time they glance at the basket filling up, both Hoai Ca and Hùng feel a sense of completeness that's hard to name, unassuming, unshowy, yet enough to lighten the heart. The morning passes in this harmonious blend of work and conversation, familiar movements and stories centered on the land before them. No one rushes, no one urges the other on, because they both understand that this work requires slowness and care. Every carrot pulled from the soil is the result of many days of tending, and every shared experience adds strength to future harvests. As the thin mist gradually fades, The image of Hoai Ca and Hung standing among the carrot rows appears simple yet deeply meaningful, a small slice of rural life, where people remain connected to the land through patience and respect. On the way home, after leaving the fields behind, and with the familiar scent of damp earth fading into the distance, Hung still carried with him the sense of peace lingering from the morning's labor. The village road stretched quietly ahead, empty of passers-by, accompanied only by the slow hum of his motorbike and the silent rows of trees lining both sides. In that seemingly ordinary moment, Hung remembered the wallet he had picked up by the roadside earlier. It wasn't something of great value to him, yet from the instant he bent down to pick it up, it had been enough to weigh on his mind, something he couldn't simply ignore or brush aside. Hung decided to stop by the local police office before heading home. The decision came naturally, without hesitation, like a habit deeply rooted in his way of thinking. He parked his bike at the gate and walked inside calmly. The wallet was held carefully in his hand, kept exactly as it had been when he found it. When he opened it in front of the duty officer, the contents were clearly intact, cash untouched, documents neatly arranged, with no sign of disturbance. Hung simply said he had found it on the road and hoped the authorities could contact the owner to return it as soon as possible. There was no hesitation or regret in his voice. The only thing on Hung's mind was the worry the owner must be feeling, the inconvenience they might face without their identification papers. To him, turning in the wallet wasn't a grand act, it was simply the right thing to do. Yet that very simplicity caught the attention of those present in the room. A few pairs of eyes followed him with warmth and quiet appreciation, as if they had just witnessed something familiar, yet not always easy to find in the rush of everyday life. As the officer checked the documents inside the wallet to complete the report, an old photograph suddenly slipped out. It was a picture faded by time, its edges slightly worn, showing it had been kept for many years. Hung instinctively bent down to pick it up, his gaze briefly passing over the face in the photo. In that split second, he froze. The face carried a sense of familiarity, so familiar that it made him look again, even though he didn't understand why. It wasn't a clear recognition, not the kind where one immediately knows who it is, but a vague, elusive feeling like a long-dusted memory quietly stirring. The eyes in the photograph, the contours of the face, all evoked an emotion Hung couldn't quite name, both distant and close at the same time. He stood still for a few seconds, holding the photo as his heart inexplicably sank, as if an invisible thread were linking the present to a part of the past he had never truly touched. Hung didn't voice that feeling. He gently placed the photograph back into the wallet, just as it had been, and continued with the handover. His demeanor remained calm, but something inside him had shifted. Though he couldn't explain it, Hung clearly sensed that the moment he saw that photograph was more than a passing curiosity. It felt like a very soft, very faint reminder, subtle, yet strong enough to stay with him for the rest of the journey. Leaving the police office, Hung stepped outside into sunlight now higher in the sky, the morning mist almost completely gone. The road home was the same, familiar and peaceful, but inside him, another layer of emotion had quietly formed. What began as a simple act of honesty and goodwill now left behind an indescribable echo. Hung didn't know who the photograph belonged to, nor why it had unsettled him so deeply. He only knew one thing with certainty. The past had just brushed lightly against the present, without noise, without clarity, yet enough to plant a quiet unease, signaling that some connections continue to exist silently, even when one isn't yet ready to name them. Back at Hoai Ca's house, the familiar slow rhythm of life once again settled over the small space. The house wasn't large, its furnishings simple, yet after a long day it carried a warmth all its own. Afternoon sunlight slanted through the doorway, spilling across the front yard where Hoai Ca sat carefully repainting old flower pots. Time had dulled their colors, the old paint peeling and patchy, and now she patiently gave them a new coat. Her hand wasn't perfectly steady. Some strokes ran a little uneven, some spots darker than others, but every brushstroke held care and patience. Her eyes were focused, lit with quiet determination, as if each pot being renewed mirrored something in her own life slowly being refreshed. Hung stood nearby, leaning lightly against a porch pillar, watching her movements. Seeing her struggle with a layer of paint she wasn't satisfied with, he gently encouraged her, saying it didn't need to be perfect, clean, and usable was enough. Then he rolled up his sleeves, picked up another pot, and helped her paint. Neither hurried the other. Each did their part, yet the coordination came naturally, as if they had long been used to sharing such small tasks together. As their hands moved steadily with the brushes, conversation flowed just as simply and naturally. They talked about when it would be convenient to go to the market, what kinds of seedlings to buy for the next season, how vegetable prices were that day, and whether they should keep some extra carrots for the livestock. The talk drifted to farming, to how unpredictable the weather had been lately and how rain and sun affected the crops. There were no grand words, just small fragments of everyday life, closely tied to meals and passing days. Hoai Ca spoke of her plan to grow more leafy vegetables around the house, making use of the old pots once they were repainted. She mentioned the rabbits and pigeons behind the house, her concern evident as she spoke. Hung listened, occasionally adding his thoughts, sharing his experience on keeping rabbits healthy and helping pigeons adapt to their coop. The conversation carried on effortlessly, unplanned, creating a sense of closeness and warmth that made the small house feel larger, filled with soft voices and quiet laughter. Joy arrived unexpectedly, in a moment that seemed utterly ordinary. When Hung went to check the rabbit hutch behind the house, he suddenly noticed something unusual. His call made Hoai Ca quickly set her brush down and follow him. In a nest of dry straw, newborn baby rabbits lay huddled together. Their tiny bodies were pink and wrinkled, gently stirring, a sight that instantly softened the heart. Hoai Ca froze for a few seconds, then smiled very gently, as if afraid to disturb the fragile little lives before her. The happiness of that moment came naturally, without needing a name. It was the simple joy of witnessing new life begin, of seeing quiet, patient care finally bear fruit. Hoai Ca bent down to look closely at each baby rabbit, her heart filled with both happiness and worry. She asked Hung whether the mother rabbit would have enough milk, whether extra food was needed to keep her strong. The concern was clear in her voice, for she knew that even a small oversight could affect the entire litter. Hung calmly reassured her, sharing his own experience. He explained that the first few days were most important, keeping the hutch clean and warm, limiting strangers so the mother wouldn't be frightened. The food needed to be nutritious, fresh water always available, and above all, the mother's behavior should be observed closely each day. Together they discussed every small detail carefully, leaving nothing overlooked. At that moment, their conversation was no longer just an exchange of experience, but a shared sense of responsibility for the tiny lives resting quietly in the straw. Hoai Ca recalled the videos she had watched on her phone, guides on raising rabbits and birds that she had quietly learned from day after day. Although her schooling in the past had been incomplete and reading didn't always come easily, by watching repeatedly and listening closely, she gradually understood how to care for animals. She stored that knowledge in her own way, slowly but surely, then applied it to her daily life. Hung noticed this. He didn't say anything, but deep down he respected her quiet effort. As evening approached, the sunlight softened, and the small house returned to its familiar calm. The half-painted flower pots were neatly set aside, the baby rabbits lay still in their nest, and the mother rabbit quietly tended to her young. Amid these seemingly small tasks, Hoai Ca and Hung both felt something clearly. Life doesn't need grand things to be happy. Sometimes, simple conversations, modest work, and unexpected joy from the smallest moments are enough to bring people closer together, in a space as peaceful and warm as this. The day passed as gently as it had begun, without haste, without noise, and without being marked by any major event. Everything unfolded at a slow, steady rhythm, like the familiar flow of life in this rural place. From the morning in the carrot fields, to the journey home with Hung's simple yet deeply honest act, and then the warm afternoon in Hoai Ca's small house, each moment followed the next naturally, forming a complete day in its own quiet way. There were no dramatic stories, no upheavals that turned life upside down, only diligent work carried out quietly from morning to evening. Hands were stained with soil, yet never hesitant. Patience accumulated through each small task, from pulling carrots and repainting flower pots to caring for the newborn rabbits. Every action felt familiar, but it was precisely this repetition that created a solid foundation for life, helping people feel secure and more connected to what they already had. Honesty was present without needing to be declared. It showed itself in the way Hung handed over the wallet he had found, without hesitation, hoping only that the owner would soon get it back and be relieved of worry. The act was quiet and unassuming, yet it left a deep aftertaste, like a testament to how he chose to live and treat others. That honesty wasn't separate from everyday life. It blended into it naturally, becoming part of the routine, just like sowing seeds properly or tending plants from their earliest days. Sharing, too, took no grand form. It appeared in words of encouragement when the paint strokes weren't quite even, in the way Hung rolled up his sleeves to help Hoai Ca without needing to be asked. It lived in conversations about going to the market, farming, raising rabbits, and keeping pigeons, topics that seemed small, yet most clearly reflected the closeness of daily life. Through each story and each shared experience, they came to understand one another more deeply, without the need for flowery words. The joys of the day were just as simple as the life they were living. The quiet satisfaction of seeing the bamboo basket slowly fill with carrots in the calm morning. The pleasure of watching old flower pots renewed and ready for a new cycle. And most of all, the unexpected joy of discovering the newborn rabbits, tiny, pink little lives nestled together in a straw nest. It was a kind of happiness that didn't call for celebration, but was enough to soften the heart, enough to make the day feel meaningful. Within that simplicity, Hoai Ca and Hung gradually recognized the core values of the life they were pursuing. Not distant ideals, nor overly ambitious dreams, but living kindly toward others and toward themselves. Working with their own hands, accepting hardship without complaint, knowing that every drop of sweat was tied to their meals, their sense of security, and their independence. Cherishing each peaceful moment because they understood that it was precisely these quiet stretches of time that sustained people in the long run. The day closed in its familiar stillness. The surroundings grew quieter, yet the sense of fullness remained steady and enduring. The work done, the conversation shared, the small joys experienced all settled into place, forming a firm foundation for the next day to begin. And in that calm flow, the story of Hoai Ca and Hung continues, little by little, woven into labor, kindness, and the simple yet profound values of everyday life. Stay tuned for the next episode to discover what happens next in the story.
Xin chào mọi người. Mình thực ra thì mình không thích tóc dài một xíu nào, nhưng mà do cái mặt của mình nó để tóc dài nó hợp hơn nên là mình phải để. Mình cắt tóc ngắn thì nó bị chỗ mình nó nóng quá, rất là làm biếng cái việc cột tóc và chăm sóc tóc luôn nhỉ. Cứ bao giờ mà nó chạy ngọn là mình sẽ cắt đi à. Bữa nay cũng phải kiểu giống như là mình chăm sóc, với lại chắc là nó ok hơn. Ngày trước tóc mình nó mỏng dính rồi nó rụng hoài luôn, mà giờ bữa nay nó khỏe, xong nó dày á mọi người. Sợi tóc nó dày nha, thứ nhất là cái sợi tóc nó dày, thứ hai là nó đỡ bị rụng á. Rồi mình cột lên này, mình cột lên nó sẽ có độ phồng này, mọi người thấy độ phồng không? Nhưng mà hết không cột tóc, mình cột lên là tóc mình được bằng này. Nói chung là tóc như này là ok rồi, tại vì nhiều quá thì cũng nặng đầu á mọi người. Mình cột nó gọn gàng như này, nhưng chỉ được một lúc là nó sẽ tụt xuống. Tạm biệt mọi người nhé.